Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 376 of the Health Detective Podcast, and we're moving right along. I actually don't have any exciting announcements necessarily or workshops to invite you to today. I feel like I always have something along those lines. I will say if you're on the audio side of this, then you're probably listening pretty late into November, and we got a bunch of good stuff going on. I can't say it out loud. I actually don't know the full extent of it, but I will just say there are certain things that happen typically at the end of November where if you're interested in a course, maybe that course is a little cheaper than normal. I don't know. I have no idea. Check us out. All right. We have a guest today who is very seasoned in the podcasting world. In fact, you always got to know your place and just shout people out. I was looking at her podcast. I'm like, gosh, dang, she got 3 times the amount of reviews that we have. So if you like this stuff, can you leave us a review? Make sure you're subscribed. It would help us out. But we do have an FDN amongst many other things. We'll talk about that with her today. Her name's Becca. She's the founder and co-owner of FitMom, a leading functional health practice dedicated to helping women get to the root of their health struggles, whether that is gut issues, hormonal imbalances, autoimmunity, or weight loss resistance. She specializes in female hormones and metabolic health. She is also the co-host of the Health Revival Show, which is a top 100 podcast in alternative health, where she delivers real talk, no fluff strategies that help women take back their health and feel like themselves again. Becca, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right, awesome. So I always start the show off kind of with the same question, and then we go off the rails. And that question that I always like to start with is, no one gets into this space by accident. Normally there's something that precedes them choosing this space, whether it's health issues or family with health issues. So what did those things look like for you, and when did they begin?
Yeah. How much time do we have? You told me 50 minutes. We have 50 minutes. So I'll try to keep this concise. And I'm going to try and separate it a little bit into childhood symptoms, young adult symptoms, and more like late 20s, early 30s, because heck, aren't we all on this constant health journey ourselves? It never ends and it always is up and down. But so one thing I think back on when I was growing up, and I actually getting this question from you guys made me reflect on this. And I was always a bigger kid growing up. So I was always a little chubby and overweight, even though I was constantly in sports. And I ate like a normal kid, every normal kid, some sugar, some fast food here and there, some soda. But my friends didn't look like me. And I'm like, why am I so much bigger than all of them? And that kind of continued on through grade school, high school, college. I was a 2-sport athlete in college, but still always just like heavier set. And some may say weight issues aren't a health symptom, but especially with the women that I work with now, weight loss resistance is one of the biggest symptoms I worry about. And so I'm sure, we can dive into that later, but fast forward after college, started competing in CrossFit, became my life. I have a little bit of an obsession thing, whether it be good or bad. But I quit my job. I basically was an economics major that got into actuarial work. I worked at Allstate and priced insurance. Not at all what I do now. So you can always change your career, anyone listening. But I basically quit my job and started managing a CrossFit gym so that I could train 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week. And this was in my early 20s, and I competed at a very high level. Top 100 females in the world in CrossFit at a point, was training to go to the games, but I looked great, but I was an absolute disaster health-wise. I was constipated. I was gassy and bloated. I was like 10% body fat, but I wasn't sleeping well. I was moody, and it was just kind of a disaster of health. But I sacrificed it all because I was like, I have to compete. I have to train. This is performance-based. I ignore all of those things, right? And so I was in my season in 2016 competing and training for the CrossFit Games and ruptured my Achilles. And so when that happened, my husband and I were like, hey, we'll start a family. I'm probably not going back to CrossFit at that level anytime soon. But I also had lost my period for 3 years. And so at the time, not knowing what I know now, I was like, this is great. I don't have a period, right? Not great for you. Hormone queen over here, like absolutely not good for you. And so we went the IVF route. And we got very lucky, had my first healthy baby. And I tried to go immediately back into my old life and, push super hard in the gym, running a business at this time. I was coaching nutrition at the gym, just kind of like macros and healthy eating and stuff like that, doing 6-week challenges. But I was burning the candle at both ends as a new mom and trying to, quote unquote, get my body back. And I crashed and burned hard. Like I was constipated. I couldn't sleep. I was chronically exhausted. I now had super heavy periods. I was gaining weight so rapidly and it wouldn't stop. I was just a shell of myself. And doctor's offices, unfortunately, were not helping. Thyroid looked normal, right? Just eat less, work out more. I was like, you don't even know what I'm already doing. Okay. Like I cannot work out anymore. And that is actually around the time that I found functional diagnostic nutrition or practitioner therapy and enrolled myself because I was like, I need to figure this out. No one is helping me in the conventional space. And I was just frustrated. And this was also actually alongside me doing a lot of the nutrition coaching and macro coaching for people at gyms. So I would go basically and run these 6-week challenges at gyms, and I would do a little nutrition seminar, and maybe 10 or 15 people would attend. I'd get people to sign up for the 6-week challenge. I would do macros and weekly check-ins and all of that stuff. And a lot of people would do better. But there was this population of females in like their 30s or 40s, and they wouldn't respond to calorie deficits properly. And I was like, what is going on? Why? First of all, why am I not responding to a calorie deficit? But also, why are these people not doing what their bodies should be doing? And I am maybe this is selfish of me. I don't like not being able to help people or not knowing the answer to things. And so I was like, I got to find the answer. And so I dove into the functional space, which is where I found FDN, and just mind blown, eyes opened. And I wish that I could say that my health issues turned around all immediately. It was definitely not that case. It was a little bit of a rocky ride. But it allowed me to see how much was going on internally beyond my symptoms. Like there was such deeper stuff happening. And so it was both selfishly driven that I wanted to help myself feel better and figure out why my body was revolting and rising up against me. Because I was always someone that was like, I can just cut calories. I can just work out more. My body will respond. And it wasn't. And I was dealing with all of these other symptoms. And so were my clients. And I was like, I can't help them. And I don't know what to do. And so that is how I found functional health. And it has been life-changing, to say the least, not only for myself, but for my clients. And it's crazy because I literally have some of the most complex cases walk into our office virtually. And there's no one that I feel like I can't help at this point. And it's just such a cool feeling. And yes, I'm still learning. And, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. But it's been life-changing. I've been able to help myself, my family, people that have been to many doctors and other naturopaths and all of these people and just feel stuck. So that's kind of how I ended up here.
Nice. All right. And I'll go to your last point first, and I want to rewind a bit. Because I don't want people to misinterpret that. I think you said it correctly. It's like, it's not that we know everything, but when you get into this space and you start networking with individuals, that's when the confidence comes. You're like, okay, if I can't figure it out, I guarantee I'm one phone call away from someone who can. And that's a really empowering thing for not only your own family and yourself. Like, it kind of is very cool to walk around and feel, I never get overly arrogant with it. I'm smart enough to know, okay, anything can happen, but I do feel very confident in my ability to deal with most of the things that life could throw at me health-wise. And then even more importantly, though, when the clients come in and they're at the end of their rope and oh my gosh, no, I got you 100%. And if I need some outside help, I got it. That's a great feeling. What I want to rewind to, because it's so interesting to me how obviously we're all unique individuals, but your profile has been on this podcast so many times. This highly driven, if I may say type A probably, woman who is very into fitness, has this paradigm shifting experience because they're doing all the things that they were taught because that's who they are, right? They'll take the stuff and they'll do it better than anyone. And it fails to work for them long term. And I think there's a lot of stuff that you probably go through experiencing this. So I have to ask one thing, because I know that it's important for our audience. when you did not have a period for 3 years, what was the thought about that? Did you think that was okay? I've had women that came on that were very transparent and said, well, it's kind of nice not having it. And that was their interpretation. Like, did you think it was odd? I just want to ask this question for the sake of the people that are listening that are going through this now. I think it, one, validates them, but two, maybe helps them shift thinking about it in a different way. So what was that like? Did you even question it?
Yeah, so I was actually on a birth control at the time that was a 3-month birth control. So you would take it for 3 months and you would have a withdrawal bleed for a month, or sorry, for a week. And so I thought that, oh, maybe I just am not having withdrawal bleeds anymore. And there was also a small part of me that was like, hey, I'm 10% body fat right now. It probably is because I've lost my period. But at that moment, there's no chance that I knew what I know now in terms of how detrimental that is to the body and the state of low hormones, how much it impacts. I mean, it turns on inflammatory processes. It triggers the immune system. Like, a state of low hormones is one of the worst things we can experience. Just ask any woman going through menopause. Like, it's not good. But I didn't realize any of that at the time. And because I was on a birth control and it was shutting down a lot of those communication pathways, I wasn't experiencing true low hormone symptoms like many women probably will.
Okay. I also think, I guess, a difference with you is the profile can be the same, but again, everyone's unique. I do not know that I've interviewed someone that was competing at the level that you were competing at. So is it fair to ask, like, do people, or women specifically at that level, do they kind of understand that the high output that they're doing physically can result in, because you almost sounded like, oh, I already knew that this could happen, where I interview people, they did not realize that's a symptom of the overexercise or low body fat.
Yeah, I had an inkling. I mean, like, I
Okay.
knew enough at that time to know that it probably was driving it.
Got it.
I think the hard thing too is every woman's different. Some women at 10% body fat can still have a cycle. A lot of women won't, right? And so it's very person dependent. But in my case, I thought part of it was the birth control, and I
Right.
thought the other part was the fact that I was extremely lean, competing a lot.
Okay. One other thing I want to touch on before we move on, and I'm sorry if these almost seem simple to you or everyday to you, but I know our audience very well, and these are the things that are most profound to them sometimes. Uh, I want to talk about what it was like when you were working with these clients, or again, even yourself, and the calories in, calories out thing, calorie deficit specifically is what you said, is no longer working. Did you have a mindset prior to that? Because I know some people that are more of that type A mindset and very disciplined. I don't want to speak for you, but they almost would think that if someone is not getting the results, maybe it's a lack of work ethic or whatever, because they're so driven, and they apply that same mindset to themselves. They're not being unfair, but they do it to themselves. So I'm very curious, whenever this comes up on the show, what was it like mentally to see this usually works and this is not working? I know that you said that you wanted to solve it for your clients, and that's what motivated you to find something like FDN. But at the time, was that confusing? Did you not believe it? Like, I want to know what it was like.
I mean, there's a small part of you that is like, they're not following the plan. There's no
Okay.
chance, because everyone loses weight if they follow this plan. But there was another part of me that was like sad. I I couldn't help them, and they
Mhm.
were paying me, and this was something that I had to learn probably just more recently. But I was like, it's my job to help them. Their healing and their success lies in my hands. And since then, I've learned, we walk alongside our clients. We do not hold their hand and do it for them, right?
Right.
But I think it's been that constant battle of it's on me to help them, and I can't. And that's a horrible feeling. And so there was a little bit of both of that. But yeah, of course, there was the feeling of this person is 70 pounds overweight and they're not losing in a calorie deficit. There's no chance they're following the plan, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, no,
that's
and I
most of the
appreciate
thought.
that transparency though, because again, and it kind of makes sense in a certain way, because you're like, we argue to the extreme and then don't realize the nuance in the middle. If I eat 0 calories tomorrow, which, just so I don't get sued, I'm not recommending at all. I mean, maybe a 24-hour fast every now and then is not going to kill you, but 0 calories forever, of course, anyone, despite the condition or genetics, is going to lose weight. I get that. If I eat 15,000 calories tomorrow indefinitely and keep doing that every day, yes, 99.99% of the population is going to gain weight from that. I get that. But I have seen this so many times, especially in the space of people who do deal with some chronic illnesses. You throw 2,500, 3,000 calories at someone. No, man, it does not respond exactly the same. I've watched myself as I got healthier just from something like that we would consider basic, like a digestion improving. I watched 3,000 calories at one point be a deficit for me to 3,000 calories, depending on how much I'm doing, almost becoming a surplus for me. And I've seen that in my own body. So of course, the sad version of this is when people, specifically women, are doing the best that they can. They're in these deficits. Now they're already like feeling like they're losing something here, and it's still not working. So you go through FDN, you start studying this stuff. What now have you discovered to be some of the main reasons that these people or women end up in these deficits and it's not working, and maybe why it didn't work for you? I'd love to touch on some of the reasons.
Yeah. So I think one of the main reasons that I found was inflammation. And what I've come to realize is that most of the weight that people are carrying around is not body fat, it's swelling, especially for females. They're literally water holding. And I know that because when we start getting inflammation calming down and we get the body processing things properly, they drop 15, 20 pounds in a month and a half. Like that's not, you don't lose body fat that fast.
Mhm.
And that's feeding them too. And so the inflammation piece was a huge eye opener for me, and also hopeful for people to be like, hey, I know you feel like you gained 30 pounds in 3 months last winter. You didn't. That's swelling. The body had an immunological inflammatory response, and it freaked out, and it caused you to store a lot of water. And I know it feels like your clothes are tighter because you're gaining body fat, but it's the immune system and it's inflammation. And so that was probably the biggest eye opener for me. And honestly, I only probably realized that in the past like 2 years worth of my education, 2 or 3 years of my education. And it has been so helpful because then this person doesn't need less calories, at least not right now, right? Because that's what they've been doing. But understanding too that, like you mentioned, one of the main ways we can calm down inflammation and calm down the immune system that's really overactive is things like fasting, is things like ketosis, is these things that basically force the body to switch into this detoxification state, this different energy burning state, right? And we never pull clients into that immediately, but the inflammatory response can be so insane for women, and our hormones are one of the main things that trigger it. And so, postpartum and coming off birth control and perimenopause, all of these different times where we have such crazy hormonal fluctuations are also correlated with times that females feel like their bodies go crazy.
Sure.
And so that's one of the biggest things that I noticed is the inflammatory and immune response. And then there's some genetic predispositions too. I've really dove into genetics, probably in the most recent year. And it's been a huge eye opener for really like a lot of the tough cases that things just aren't working how they should. And some people have really big inflammatory predispositions. Some people have big autophagy predispositions that don't allow their body to get into autophagy easily. And so they tend to have higher blood sugars and A1C levels. Neurotransmitter predispositions can force people to not respond well to stress. And so their blood sugars run constantly high because of their inability to break down dopamine and norepinephrine and adrenaline. So I would say those are probably my two biggest realizations are the inflammatory and immune response, and then someone's genetics.
I like that you specified the part about 15 pounds in a month or whatever it was. People almost don't believe these numbers, but I would 100% back what you said. I'm only using her name because she shared this at one point. 4 years ago, I worked with this woman, Kate. We didn't even get to the more advanced labs yet, but she was coming from like standard American diet, like McDonald's. I mean, So we do the food sensitivity test and some basic diet stuff first, just to ease in, because there's no point in doing all this stuff when you're coming from standard American. We're like, we'll just start with this. I never said count calories. I never said, anything like that would even remotely talk about macros. It was just because I thought we had to start slow. So I'm like, let's just start with eating healthy food and not McDonald's. Let's work with that. So we adjusted for like 2 out of her 20 sensitivities. Again, didn't want to overwhelm her. This woman shows the before and after, and within 1 month, it was like 35 days to be accurate, 32 pounds down. And then people get skeptical that it's like, okay, well, you're thinking fat, and in which case you should be skeptical. But it's like if a body's walking around and is inflamed as all hell because her TSH was through the roof, she's on medications for it now. She was notably overweight because of the stuff that her body was going through. Yeah, like you can make fast transformations with some people. I also like what you said about the genetics. I know no one that's overweight wants to hear this, but ironically, if you gain fat easily, it's almost a genetic advantage because what gets stored in the fat is the toxins. And so when toxins go to your fat, that means they don't go to wonderful things like your brain and liver and overabundances where they could actually harm you. So it's so funny because you'll kind of meet these people that do deal with that sometimes, and then they're otherwise like the happiest people ever. And I'm like, oh, well, genetically you're protecting your organs, but of course they don't feel it that way. And that doesn't mean that they want to be like that. So we could still do stuff to eliminate the toxins. You had already mentioned things like fasting and ketosis. I can't not hit on that right away. One, because I'm interested in it and I've loved doing it. But two, I know that almost similar to the high level athletic stuff, anyone can take these things too far. Definitely women are overrepresented in people who do take the keto and fasting too far, and then it bites them in the butt. So you even said you don't start them with that right away. Let's talk about how you work and then how people can get this beneficial metabolic state.
Yeah, absolutely. So we start everyone with what we call kind of like a cleanse process. And it is diet changes, right? And one of the big things that I remind people of, and what I talk about on my social media a lot, because people are like, how can I, heal my Hashimoto's, or how can I calm down my immune system? Diet variation is one of the safest ways to do this. And it is turning whatever you're doing on its head. And so what we do is we support the liver, we support the adrenals, the thyroid, the gut, all initially with some supplementation support. And we put them on a very high fiber Mediterranean-based diet. And so we know that super high fiber is not only helping kind of reshape microbiome, it's helping the liver a ton with detoxification and binding to things. And we give them actually 2 smoothies a day, lots of fiber and seafood actually to help with omega-3 increase and improving digestion speed, because I don't want to slow down digestion if I'm opening up detox pathways. And so this whole kind of like beautiful, intricate cleanse helps bring up fiber, helps put them a ton of antioxidants through that fiber. And it kind of helps open up detox pathways. And that alone for a lot of people, because it's so different than what a lot of people are doing. No one eats 50 to 60 grams of fiber a day. No one does it. And so by doing that, we kind of manipulate water a little bit. People drop a ton of inflammation, energy improves, brain fog improves, sleep improves for a lot of people. And so we also feed them up. Like, we're not dieting people right away. We're trying to feed them as much as we can, because we're trying to re-nourish them. As you know, most people coming in, they're deficient in a ton of minerals and nutrients. They're already under eating, trying to lose weight or do things to improve their health. They aren't eating enough. And they're not eating enough of the right things. A lot of them are probably inconsistently eating. Maybe they're trying to fast. And so we re-nourish, we support the liver, we support the gut, the adrenals, the thyroid, and we re-nourish them for a solid month. And then we get into gut work and we get into all of, the process that we're supposed to go through, maybe doing other testing. But I have to build the resiliency of the body first before I try to stress it. Right.
Yeah.
And we all know that if you try to fast someone that's already fasted or stressed, it's not going to do anything. It's going to make it worse. And so we have to build the body up first. And that's what we always start with. And we usually at some point are starting to watch blood sugars. Because the reason I use like a Keto Mojo or a blood sugar monitor, it gives me real-time feedback. And I can see, okay, how are they responding to this meal versus this meal? And we'll do maybe like some carb manipulation, carb pulse type dieting. But the biggest reason that we do this, and the most general way I explain it to people, is we have 2 energy pathways, right? We have our mTOR pathway, which is our growth pathway. That pathway runs on glucose. It can also run on protein for some people if you take away glucose, because we know protein can turn to glucose through that gluconeogenesis process. But that mTOR pathway is great if you're a child that needs to grow, if you're someone that's a bodybuilder trying to grow muscle. But that mTOR pathway is not great for cancer proliferation, for chronic disease growth, for cell tissue growth. Like, we don't want that pathway being dominant. The other pathway is the AMPK pathway. It's your fat burning pathway, right? That's the pathway where we are in when we are in ketosis. That pathway is your breakdown pathway, your detox pathway. And so by looking at blood sugars and a lot of times ketones eventually, I can start to see how likely are we in that pathway of the fat burning breakdown detox? Because if I have someone that has chronically elevated blood sugars, yeah, it's a concern for weight gain and it's a concern for diabetics. But for me, I'm like, no, we can't detox. You can't get things out of your body. That's a much bigger concern because we are on the road for chronic disease. And so that is where we use, and we know The only ways to activate that AMPK pathway are extreme calorie deficits, ketosis, or fasting. And so we use some of those methods, and we do them strategically to keep people fed. We'll do a fasting period, but make sure they're eating 1,700 calories in their eating window or something like that. But that's essentially how we monitor and work, deep-rooted autoimmunes or immune-based issues to help people heal. Because at the end of the day, it's all the immune system. It's triggered.
Yeah. Well, and I love that this is coming up, because it's actually kind of amazing how often this doesn't come up on the show, because people forget. I think they learn about ketosis, learn about fasting. It's like an interesting part maybe in the functional medicine world, but we get very fancy with our labs and all this stuff. And that's cool too. I love the labs. I'm sure you love the labs.
Yes.
But nature or God, whatever you subscribe to, gave us this ability to almost like clean our body out, which is very interesting as someone who's connected all of this, or at least attempted to the degree that my brain's able. You look at in different religions, not just Christianity, not just Islam, like fasting is a recommended thing in a lot of these for these cleansing purposes. And it's kind of stunning, because now we have the science to back up that's actually exactly what it does. And it does seem to be or it should have been a natural cycle, right? We should have had a feast, and then other times we would have had famine. So it's almost as if the body was designed to do these things perfectly, except we have the worst of both worlds in today's world. We have unlimited calories, not everyone in Western society, generally speaking, we have unlimited calories, but we have lower nutrients. And then we have plants, which, yes, are important for certain vitamins, but they also hold toxins from the environment. And so we're eating constantly, right? Like you said, keeping that blood sugar elevated. And we have more of a toxic load than ever before. And our sleep sucks. So it's basically highest stress the body's ever had to deal with chronically, and worst ability to detoxify from it. And then, of course, people are going to be walking around like this. So you almost need this balance eventually, which is why, again, you're not starting that for them on day one. You're almost taking them back to what they probably should be doing naturally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we do the ketosis and the autophagy work with most people in the middle portion. And what we're trying to do, and the way that I explain it, is imagine like a rusty lever, right? Where you can't get it to move out of that mTOR sugar burning pathway, and sugars just stay high. We need to get that lever some WD-40, and we need to get it moving again, because now we can have metabolic flexibility. And once you gain metabolic flexibility, you have it. Like, it can move back and forth much easier. Sometimes for the first time, it might take someone 2 months to get into ketosis. But once you get there, well, now I can start feeding them carbs again and then put them back into ketosis a lot faster, like within a week. And once I can see that with ketones and blood sugars, I know this person's metabolically flexible. And underneath all of that, the way that I explain why autophagy is so important is the oxidative stress buildup, what we call immunosenescent cells, or these zombie cells that accumulate because at some point the immune system gets triggered, right? In my situation, my immune system got triggered because the chronic overexercising, the by nature under eating. I could have eaten 3,000 calories and I probably would have still been in a calorie deficit because I was working out way too much. But that combination for so long caused this inflammatory, and then I had a baby postpartum, causes this inflammatory response. My weight gain that was like 15 pounds in 6 weeks was not body fat. It was my immune system freaking out because it couldn't take it anymore. For some people, it's getting COVID. For other people, it's going through a divorce, right? Whatever that immune trigger is, it causes this inflammatory cascade, which causes the immune system to go haywire. It spews inflammation, and our body can't keep up with calming it down. And that's where the autoimmunity gets triggered. That's where the eczema, that's right. And all these symptoms pop up, and we're like, well, I need a cream for my eczema. No, your immune system's freaking out. Like, you need to calm the immune system down. And what the autophagy work does, because when this immune system gets so overactive, it causes this accumulation. And the way I explain it is, think of like a pipe, right? We know when pipes get really unhealthy, they rust, and that rusting kind of closes off that pipe flow. I think of that rusting somewhat like oxidative stress on the inside of the body, and essentially these immunosenescent cells that are basically zombie immune cells that are dead cells. They aren't doing anything for you, but they haven't been cleared by the body like they should have. So they just kind of spew inflammation. And these things accumulate, causing the inside of the body not to function properly. And so what we do through, whether it's supplementation, autophagy work, we're kind of breaking down that rust internally and allowing the pipe, our bodies, to function better. And that's when you see those ketones producing, you see the blood sugars improving. That's all that sign that the body's cleaning itself. We know deep fasts are huge healing processes. They're the body kind of resetting itself. And so whenever I see anything autoimmune related, hormonal related, massive weight gain, eczema, psoriasis, SIBO. I mean, like all of these things are a situation where the immune system's gone haywire.
Mhm.
And so it's a way that I have found universally almost calms things down. So that's why we, utilize it and help kind of heal from the inside.
The philosophy of FDN was created prior to, certainly not the religious doctrines, but definitely before some of the science was as mainstream around ketosis. But I've noticed a lot of practitioners kind of just adopting that naturally anyway. And it's not that people hear keto and then they get like triggered, right? It's like, oh, it's a diet, it's this, it's that, it's a cult that I have to be in. It's like, well, no, it's a metabolic state, and you probably should be able to get into that fairly easily if you want to be here for a while or consider yourself in good health. It is undeniable to me how much better I feel now being able to go one way or the other. And it is interesting, to your point, you said like if someone's just starting out, it might take 2 months before they can get into it. It wasn't quite 2 months for me, but I noticed that it was quite tough and I was very sensitive to the carbohydrates. And then the longer that I did it and the longer that I practiced different fasts and all this stuff, I went a little too far with it. I've done plenty of 72 hours and 48 hours. Like a little bit experimental considering how much I was doing at the time. But then nonetheless, like when I track the stuff now, it's like I don't even need to be a nut with the tracking, and I just find myself randomly throughout the day producing, a notable amount of ketones, and it's just because I haven't eaten in 5-6 hours, even though I'm still eating carbohydrates. So I don't know if everyone's body is going to be exactly like that, but it is something that once you get it back, if you're even mildly responsible with it, it does seem like something that's fairly easy to keep long term, comparatively speaking, to your beginning of the journey. With that all said, then, I want to make sure we have enough time for this. So, FitMom, how did that come to be? Was that post FDN, or were you already doing that beforehand?
My company has kind of changed throughout my experience years. So I used to be lifestyle nutrition, and that was when I was in the CrossFit gyms, and we were doing these 6-week challenges, and I ended up getting a client load that I couldn't handle, and I was searching for someone to help, and I got connected with who is now my business partner, has been my business partner for 7 years, and it was serendipitous. I mean, like we're best friends. She lives an hour away. We batch podcasts at her house on Tuesdays. She has a big podcast studio in her basement. And on social media, she's the poop queen. I'm the hormone queen. She loves the gut stuff. I love the hormone stuff. And obviously we know as FDNs, like you do it all, but our niche is kind of those populations. And so anyways, she went a little bit of a different route with education. I went the FDN route. She went a different route. And we've allowed for both experiences to kind of be combined. And now we have a team of 6, and all of us have different little expertise areas and different knowledge bases. But essentially FitMom was started as mostly nutrition and lifestyle. It was helping people with macros, helping people reverse diet, all of those things, and get back into a healthy lifestyle. And then it turned into, once I went to FDN, she went a different route, and we started learning a lot of the functional testing. It was utilizing the testing to help get understanding of like deeper root issues. And since then it's turned into what I call kind of like a concierge functional medicine service. And we do one-on-one cases with really complex clients, people that, have done so many things and just are not healthy and have been dealing with chronic illness. And so we're very fortunate. We've grown all organically, all through referral, mostly our social medias, and just, providing a really high quality service for the client, because at the end of the day, these people just want to be heard. They just want to be helped. And if you can truly show that care for a client and work for them and work to, find their answers and help them. I mean, I have clients sometimes where like, we have not gotten to the root of things. We're still going through the throes of it. And they're like, no, I definitely want to re-sign. And I'm like, really? I feel like I haven't helped you at this, and because they're a super complex case. But if you develop that relationship, like we have vowed to always do for our clients, no matter how big we get as a company, that matters to people, And so now we're in a place where we have an assistant, we have a marketing head, we have a team of, 6 practitioners, and it's awesome. We actually had our first gathering a couple of weeks ago where we flew all of our practitioners out for a week of teaching and, team gathering and, team bonding and talking to our team in person, because we're all remote all over the country. It was just really humbling, kind of understanding what we've built and how many people we've helped at this point. And it's just, I absolutely love what I do. And I'm completely obsessed with it. Ask my husband. He's like, you work more than anyone I've ever met. But I'm also a mom of 2 little kids, and, I try to fit in time for me, and it's just really cool what FitMom has turned into, and we're not done. We're constantly finding ways to grow bigger and help more people and change the world. So it's cool.
I love what you said. For those that are working remote out there, I feel like that's a lot of our viewers sometimes, because they have the ability to watch maybe while being at home. Who knows? And you should be working. But with that said, it's like I've only gotten to do that with the full team a couple of times with FDN in the 4 years I've been here. And it's just so powerful, especially since you work with these people fairly intimately on a regular basis. Then to just get to see their faces and their energy in person, you always leave like feeling inspired. So I love that you guys are doing that. And I think if you're doing that with 6 practitioners, a marketing head, and then you 2, it's like, okay, if you're doing that now, this is just bound to soar. Very cool. So can we talk more though about, from the audience perspective, I always like them to get to hear more about who specifically like your perfect person to help is. And here's why. With our edition of Science Matters, I don't record that one, but we have 4 podcasts that go out every week. We do specialize in talking to practitioners, obviously. And so what I like to do is make sure that some of the audience members are getting paired up with these perfect people for them. So FitMom, I mean, that kind of gives me some implication of who you're targeting. But at the same time, you said, and I know how it gets, like you just start attracting a bunch of people that aren't feeling well, especially if it's referral based, right? Because someone could have one autoimmune condition, they know a friend with autoimmune, and they're like, oh no, come on, you got to try these people out. So to the degree that you're able, when you think about like the perfect client in your head of like, oh, I can definitely help this person, and this is who I love to work with, who do you think fits that description?
It's funny because the person that I help, I don't want to say is not the person I want to help, but they're the tough client. So they're me. I attract me, I've found. And that is the type A female. And even though our company name is FitMom, we don't discriminate against like it's we work solely with females though, unless it's like a referral, or we actually get a lot of husbands. A lot of the women that we work with are like, can you please help my husband? So we'll work with some of the husbands, but we mainly work with women, usually age range between like 30, 35 and 60 and even up. And a lot of them are dealing with, they're in a new phase of life. What they used to do is not working anymore. They are go, go, go. They're either a mom or they're in a high profile job, and they have a lot on their plate, and they're trying to do all the things, go to Orange Theory, F45, not get enough sleep, fasting unintentionally, drinking coffee all day. But also the people that are kind of doing a lot of things right. Like they're eating whole foods, maybe not enough of them, but they're eating whole foods. They're moving their body, but now they're dealing with all of a sudden, constipation that came out of nowhere. We also deal with chronic constipation, but it's like this mix between it hit them come their mid 30s, 40s, or they've been dealing with it for their entire life. And now they're like, I can't take it anymore. It's, something should have been improved. My doctor has me on Miralax and it's not helping, and I feel like it's not healthy. Or, okay, now my eczema is out of control, or my psoriasis, or my hair loss, right? So it's a lot of that. We get them in that 30s to 40s when I think hormones are starting to decline a little bit. They're starting to feel the effects of a lot. We're not as stress tolerant without those hormone levels. We're kind of settling into life a little bit, and we're just not happy. We don't feel good. We're not sleeping. So it depends on the case, but it ranges. That's the hard thing. I think my perfect client is someone that's me, because I know I can help that person and I can relate to them. That person that tries to use exercise as a way to lose weight, that tries to undereat too much, that puts way too much on their plate and can't slow down. And I like opening up their eyes to realize more is not more at this phase in life, and ways to kind of hack your health to optimize, which I'm all about. I am very into, utilizing peptides sometimes, utilizing alternative functional methods to help the people that want to feel amazing, but maybe the stress in their life doesn't allow for it, and they can't quit their business. They can't get rid of their kids. And so I like helping that population a lot. And it's been really a big game changer for us, because there are some people that, at least in my experience, diet and exercise and supplementations were not enough.
Sure.
And it was such an extreme case that like we needed, a rapamycin or a BPC 157 or some of these peptides that can really help extreme situations a lot faster. So I've been kind of into that world too, which I know is not technically in the FDN world, or like their teachings, but once you grow your knowledge and all of those things, I've just started experimenting and researching, and it's been really powerful for us. But that probably did not at all answer your question, because we work with so many different types
No,
of
no, that's okay.
people. But it's the middle-aged female that I think things have finally hit them, because whether it's a decline in hormones, whether it's too much stress on their plate and it's added up, um, and they're dealing with so many chronic symptoms that they've had enough.
Sure. Well, to your point though, because we've had people on the show talking about psychedelics or whatever it might be. Yes, I mean, these things aren't taught in the FDN course, specifically what you said, peptides, but it's like FDN more so than anything is a way of thinking. And it's a way of thinking that addresses the person that is in front of you. And to me, it actually sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. You're talking about these people that either are making a conscious choice to participate in certain things in their life, or they can't get out of it right now because they're locked in and it would be detrimental. It would be more detrimental to lose the business or the job or whatever it might be than to currently deal with what they're dealing with. So I get that. And I think as long as our clients understand what they're doing and not doing, it doesn't really matter. I've been transparent on here. We had an FDN who was a chemist, actually, and his name's a waste ball. Love the guy. He is a walking science experiment. So we'll see if this worked out 20 years from now. But he is originally the one that got me into different peptides and stuff. And I'm currently working with a doctor that is about to do my second shipment ever of Somorelin. And I think it's cool. And it does help me perform at a higher level. It absolutely allows me to do more. And I think these are personal decisions to some degree that people need to make, because and maybe half of our audience doesn't get this, I'm not sure, but definitely people that are like you and I and more type A kind of get this. When you're in the functional medicine thing, the first thing that you want to do is heal. And then you're so dang passionate about what you're doing, if you weren't before, that now the irony is you end up maybe working more than anyone your husband knows, right? Which is, it's good. I'm sure it like inspires you, but it's still work nonetheless, right? And when we're doing that, it becomes a thing of, all right, well, now I'm not unhealthy anymore, but I want to figure out how I can optimize as much as possible, maybe given a body or even some genetics that are suboptimal for today's world. So I don't mind doing that. I want to be here and live an amazing life for the next few decades at the very minimum. If I can do longer than that, that's awesome. But those are personal things. So it's probably a separate podcast. But yeah, that's still within the scope of FDN because you're addressing the person, right? You're not handing them out to every single person as standard, correct?
No, and we actually one of the cool things about our company is we have a medical team that backs us.
Oh, geez, nice.
So I have a medical team that works all remotely. It's a team of nurse practitioners, and I can meet with them with my client virtually.
No
And
way.
I
Nice.
can, so I can discuss with them like, hey, this client, their blood sugars are not responding. We've been doing fasting, we've been doing the dietary protocols, we've calmed down inflammation. I want to put them on a low dose GLP-1. And so they will prescribe from a compounded pharmacy. It will get shipped to their house. If, I have a client that wanted to go through a build phase, I just put her on tesamorelin and oxandrolone for just an 8-week cycle. And so having that ability is awesome. And then genetically, we run genetics on every client now. And we see it can kind of help us predict the future a little bit. So like I had a really tough mold case, and we could not figure out what was going on. She had horrible acne. She had gained about 50 pounds in a year, just rapidly. And we could not get it to calm down. And so I ended up getting genetics on her, and we had her test the house. She was living in mold, and her genetic detoxification ability was completely like she had one of the worst genetic profiles for detoxification. And so I got her on a very low dose GLP-1. And then I put her on rapamycin 2 times a week. And within 4 months, she dropped 40 pounds and her acne completely cleared up. We were doing mold protocols. Like I was doing the things that should have been working, and she could not detox the stuff that we were trying to flush. And so the peptides allowed her body, because it's a stronger support, right? But we consult with a medical team. They require blood work. If I have a client that I want to put on HRT, I take them to the medical team. They require blood work every 3 to 4 months. Like it's really nice to have the conventional side and be able to kind of blend it with the functional side
Really
for those people that are either severe cases and need it, or people that want to optimize, right? I take a low dose GLP-1 because genetically I turn on inflammation like a mofo. Like it is not fair. I could look at alcohol or a meal out and I put on 3 to 4 pounds. That's hard to get off because my body just turns on inflammation like nothing. And the GLP-1, a microdose of a GLP-1 has helped me hold a weight I never thought I could hold, and I feel amazing. And I've
Sure.
done diet, and it's a tool, right? It's not a silver bullet. And that's what I tell every client that we put in that. It's a tool that we are using alongside other things to help improve the situation. And if we don't need it after we improve the situation, we take it out, right? But it's just different tools in the toolbox that you grow to learn.
This is 100% the philosophy I've developed. And I'm not just agreeing with you because you're live. This is really what I believe. People, when you start doing this for a while and then you really understand what it means to address the person and not the paperwork, which Reed always talks about, you start to understand that there are pros and cons. I think what happens in natural medicine is we get a lot of purists. And right, we want to, I mean, they have 30 supplements that they're taking every day, but they want to be, pure and follow those rules as much as possible. And I probably even entered the space in that way. But let's take that acne example. I think it's a perfect one. So this woman, severe acne, and then 50 pounds extra, in a year. Let's say the peptides that she was given actually did have some side effects. Let's even say they had some long-term side effects, and they didn't, right? But let's say that. What was worse? The devastating stress that she must have been feeling psychologically every day, carrying around 50 extra pounds, is not good for your health also, like physical health, right? And the acne, because I know I had severe cystic acne for like 10 years of my life. I know exactly what that's like. I don't believe that woman's worse off, even if there was some risk in that stuff, right? And again, there's very minimal risk when you're doing the blood work and working with a medical team. I think we need to move away from that sometimes and just understand too that so many of us that have been chronically ill, life was hell at one point for some of us. And I don't mean it in a dramatic way. I still lived a nice middle-class lifestyle, possibly even upper middle class at times. I didn't talk to my parents about that at 14. But when you're walking around and you don't even feel comfortable in your own skin, or you're dealing with panic attacks every day, or you have depression so bad that you're dealing with suicidal ideations, yeah, man, give me something to help me get back to life here. Like I'm good with that. That's a positive trade-off. So I actually love that we got into that today. I wasn't really expecting the conversation to go there necessarily, but we don't get enough of this on here. It ends up being a very purist thing, and there's validity to that as well. But I think the future of medicine, I think we're going to continue to create stuff that's actually going to be amazing for longevity. Now, whether simpletons like us get access to it or it's only going to be the elites, I have no idea. But I will word it this way. I think if you stick around on this earth for the next 15 to 20 years, you might be able to be on this earth for a very long time, and you might be feeling pretty darn. It's very weird to say that, and I don't mean that as like, ooh, edgy stuff on the podcast. It's like, no, if you look at what's being done, like, dude, they're regenerating organs with stem cells. So when we nail that down, I mean, what are we really made of just stuff that breaks down? So what happens when that's optional?
My dad has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and Parkinson's, and I can guarantee it's because he owned a factory, a lumber manufacturing factory where they built furniture, and he was around stains and fumes. And I know that was part of it, but his Parkinson medication was not helping. I found a peptide that was safe for his cancer, and it has been helping with his neuropathy pain. Like it's just such a different world. And I really think it is going to explode soon. It already has a little bit, but it's people, like you said, when they're just in such a pain place, they want anything to help. And a lot of these are very, very safe. I mean, they're peptides, they're natural compounds. And so, yeah, it's just been a really cool world and space to learn more about. And I'm still learning so much. But yeah, it's helped a lot of our clients.
Awesome. Becca, I have some quick questions just to wrap up here as we're at 48 minutes. One of the questions is, and I never, ever want people like you that have multiple certifications in areas that you studied, and not to mention a partner that you're working with, right? I don't want to ever overstated. So just whatever it is. How much would you say FDN has helped contribute to your current success with clients and with your business? Because I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is the stories that I love having on. I mean, you got 6 practitioners working under you. You got a partner, you got the marketing person, you got an assistant, you're teamed up with medical professionals, like Western medicine professionals. That's really amazing. So what % would you say FDN contributed to you being able to do this?
Oh, you're going to make me give a percent.
Sorry.
I would say FDN was at least 50% of my initial introduction to functional world. And it helped open my eyes to how the body works and how it is not a siloed, this organ and that organ, it works together. And it was the foundation. I would say it's the foundation for my understanding of functional health. And yes, I've gone down rabbit holes beyond that. But FDN was my first exposure.
Awesome.
first / second. But yeah, it started everything for me. And sure, you got to work after it. But it was my beginning.
Sweet. Well, no, and you have a unique story in the sense that you came with this business background, like you had done other stuff. And I feel like I'm being salesy when I talk to people sometimes on the phone. And like when they'll tell me that they currently have a client base, I'm like, oh my goodness, if you already have a client base and you figured that part out with like a basic health coach certification or personal training or whatever, and then you add on FDN, if you had the business savvy to figure that other part out, this is game over. You're going to help people at the highest level you've ever helped them. They are going to be sending referrals nonstop. You're freaking running off organic referrals right now. That's amazing. So really cool. Congratulations. Where can people find you if they met that demographic or they're listening to you and just relate to you and would like to work with your team?
Yeah, so I'm mainly on social media, Instagram mostly, at the Hormone Queen. And then our website is fitmomlife.com. And that's where you can learn about us. That's where you can like set up a consult. We do free consults. Our assistant takes all their sales calls. She even has a background in functional nutrition. So if you just want to know more about our program, but I usually say following me on social media, I'm in my DMs. I don't have a bot or anything. But I'm in there talking to people, trying to help however I can.
I'd like for you, please, and I really appreciate you being so polite, but I'd like you to shout out your podcast too. I
Oh,
always
yeah.
say podcasts are like TV.
Yeah.
I hope you guys don't watch too much TV, but most people have a favorite show, but they still watch more than one show. So it's not a competition to me. I'd love for them to check out your stuff.
Yeah.
It seems like you have a very well done podcast. So what is it?
Yeah. So the Health Revival Show is the name of our podcast. And it started out as the Food Code. We recently rebranded and we lost a lot of our reviews. Sadly, I didn't realize when you rebrand a show, you lose all your reviews. And so we're like, please review us again. We have over 700 episodes. We've been podcasting for 3 years almost, and we are a top 1% podcast in the world. And so it's awesome. We talk about anything and everything. Obviously, mainly women's functional health. But I always tell people they kind of get to know me on my podcast. Like they get to know who you are,
For sure.
So.
Final question on the show is if we could give you a magic wand and you could get all the viewers, listeners, future viewers and listeners to do one thing for their health. So that means you can get us all to start doing one thing, or you can get us all to stop doing one thing. What's the one thing that Becca gets us to do?
Oh, it's a great question. Experiment with your diet, experiment with what supplements you take. Like you don't know until you feel it. Mm-hmm. And one of the best things I've done is not hold on to what beliefs I always had. I used to believe keto was horrible. I used to believe fasting was horrible. I used to believe all of these things that have now become one of the biggest healing tools that I have with my clients. And so the more open-minded you can be and the more you can experiment on yourself, the more you're going to learn not only about you, but about what works and what doesn't. So I think people just need to be more open-minded in general.
Awesome. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please drop a thank you in the chat for Becca and definitely go check out her stuff. Again, there's no competition in the podcast space. And would go as far as to say she probably produces stuff that's more relevant to a portion of you. Maybe that's the content that you really need to help you. And then you guys find some people and send them here if you think it's the content that they need to help them. Becca, you rock. This is like perfect example of what FDN can do for people, especially if they already have that business mindset. There are real people out here creating jobs for other individuals because of what they're doing with FDN, changing lives of people with the health side, and then liking work so much that you end up becoming the person that your husband knows who works the most. I don't even think most people can comprehend what it means to like what you do so much that you want to do it all the time. That's a very good problem to have, considering most of us have to work for at least 40 years out of our